Okay, so when you're at Harvard, what are you majoring in? What are you studying at Harvard?
First year, everyone takes the same things, and then eventually there's some, but there's not that much choice. But I took a number of classes about criminal procedure and stuff, because I was thinking if I stayed in the law, I would do what I then did, which was I was a law clerk and then applied to the office that Rudy Giuliani used to run, the
Right.
U.S. Attorney's Office, before he'd gone off the deep end. Back in the day, and I joined just after he left the office, but he had made that office just kind of and it is the oldest prosecutor's office in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And because the jurisdiction is New York City and it's all Wall Street crime, mobster, media stuff. First,
You were involved in the Michael Milken trial, right?
No, a friend of mine was. I had I observed the Leona Helmsley trial.
Mm-hmm.
But I did, like my first case was a small part of the Russian mob to get these guys to flip on my mentor's bigger case. And at that point, it was a segment of the Russian mob that was all Jewish. And they're all Jewish immigrants who would come to New York. And my grandfather himself, a Holocaust survivor who had left Prague in 1940, came to trial, and the courtroom was just packed with the defendants' families. And he said at the break, he says, "Tell me, in all of New York, there's not one non-Jewish criminal defendant you could prosecute?" And I was like, "Grandpa, these guys are not good people." So, yeah.
But so when you, because I feel like what you've alluded to is a lack of passion that you're sort of relating to me. So between graduating from Harvard and then going to Harvard Law School, at none of that time are you like fired, like I'm going to become a rock star in the DA's office, I'm going to do this, I'm going to become... That wasn't an intoxicating idea?
I think, yes, and there was something about it that certainly appealed to me. And I knew, when you're in law school, they spoon feed you certain kind of jobs that pay a lot that you don't particularly want at law firms. And so they were going to do that. And I had come close to thinking, well, that's what I'll do, until I was clerking and I got to know a mentor of mine who happened to be Jim Comey, who would go on to be the director of the FBI. And he had clerked for the same judge I did, so he'd always come around just to schmooze with the judge and the new clerks, and we became good friends. And he was in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I started to understand what they did, and that just seemed, it's an amazing world down there in Foley Square.
Yeah.
It's like, you work with the FBI, the DEA, the Secret Service. It's the best defense lawyers in the city, the sleaziest defense lawyer, agents who are really interesting and some who you want to keep an eye on, and the judges all have, so it's no secret that a lot of shows are set in courtrooms and because everyone goes through them. You can, every kind of character, rich, poor, sleazy, honorable, whatever it is, they all sometimes end up in a courthouse. So I was interested there, but honestly, as much for like the stories that I was seeing.
Yeah.
And so I had an interest and kind of always
Was it a lucrative job?
No, working for the government, pays you little. I made more working for law firms in the summer when I was in law school than I probably did a whole year working for the government. And the idea is you get trial experience and it's fun and interesting, and then law firms want to hire you because you've had all this experience.
And was that where you thought maybe you were heading?
You sign up for 3 years, and it was coming up to the end of my third year, and my wife at the time, who's still a beloved friend, we went out to lunch with...
And you had 2 kids at this point, right?
Just one.
Okay.
Oh, at this point, she wasn't even pregnant. We were just about to start thinking about a family, and we went out one day to breakfast with a really good friend of mine and his wife, who I was friends with too, who were in LA in the business. And she said, "When do you think it's too late for Rich?" Because he's always, and my friend's wife, she said 30. And I was 29. And I took it to heart. And so I started to wake up early and write late nights. And Mona, my wife and friend, she kept noting, like, on weekends, you're getting up early to work now. When before, if you had to go to the courthouse to work on something on a weekend, sometimes you'd walk. Now, to make that obvious, we lived on 110th Street. Going down to Foley Square was a long, but it was I was in no rush to sit down. And and in the time I was writing scripts, then I sent them, it all happened rather quickly. I had a friend who gave them to his agent. The agent had hated them. It would have been the end of it. And it was Ari Emanuel, who was then not the Ari he is today.
Right.
He was a young agent himself. And he did like them. And I remember the day coming home. It was Mona's birthday on June 14th. I had taken her to see Ella Fitzgerald at Radio City. I said, you've got to see Ella Fitzgerald at least once. And we had a message on the voice machine, the little recorder machine.
I remember those.
Track to track.
Yeah.
From Ari saying, I've read your scripts, I'd like to represent you.
And you had written these scripts by yourself or collaborated?
No, written these scripts. I'd written episodes of Larry Sanders. I'd written sketches for Saturday Night Live. I'd written material for Letterman just to cover all the bases so they'd have a sampling. And by this point, we were expecting a child. And when I got the job at The Simpsons, I said, well, my wife's about to give birth. And he said, well, I said, when do I start? He said, well, when can you fly? I said, well, let me call the OBGYN. She said, it's 6 weeks. I said, apparently he can fly at 6 weeks. Add 6 weeks to the birth date. That's your start date. And we came out, I had a 10-week contract, no health insurance, no guarantees, a 6-week-old baby, a new city. Looking back on it.
But it was so exciting.
It was exciting. And that
scary,
passion you're
sure,
talking about was the driver. And I felt like, what you were saying, every job has ups and downs. Every job has bad days and good days. And a friend of mine gave me great advice. He said, because he'd gone to law school, then he became a journalist. And he said, after a crappy day, I go to bed, but I think, no, what I do matters and it's something I want to do. And I knew from the moment I was out here 30 years ago that telling myself I'm a comedy writer, telling myself that this is my world and these are my colleagues and my friends, that feels right. And it makes me feel good, even if I have a show canceled. I think I've had 2 or 3 canceled. It's okay. It's all in a world that I not only want to be in, but had looked out from the outside in, thinking, how do I get into
the doing.
that?
It's when the doing is what brings you joy.
Yeah.
I mean, the accoutrement, the money and trinkets and all that is great when you have success, when you have accolades.
And this man knows about money and trinkets.
I know a little bit about that.
Yeah.
We'll do a cutaway to my bathroom later. No, it's the doing.
The only thing not in there is a toilet, but I mean, it's got every gold record you could want.
But your description of not feeling any of that in your life before in New York, that it was a job, that it was like it was not the doing. I mean, I'm sure that there were some exciting days.
Yeah, trials were always funny and fun. I mean, look at me. It's like they weren't always funny. They were about crimes. I shouldn't say that.
Yeah.
But the things that I enjoyed were the human interactions and the personality quirks of the judge and the defense lawyers and working with the juries. That was all fascinating because it's theater.
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
And the jury's your audience. And you knew humor works in court. You just have to, it's just in a small amount. You can't seem like you're, but yes, I didn't have that same fear of failure. I'm not embarrassed to say, I didn't lose a trial. I was very confident, partly because
whatever.
Worst thing happens, they fire me.
Right.
Good.
Yeah.
And then I started at The Simpsons. That was my first job 10 weeks in. And I was surrounded by names because it was only like the 4th season of the show, but I knew the names from the credits. And I didn't say anything. And I had a 10-week contract. And after like 4 weeks, I went up to a friend of mine who I'd made in the room. And I said, I feel like I should just resign. He said, no, you're doing it the right way. Yeah. You come in, you absorb, you don't have all the answers. That's what you should do. 4 weeks later, he came up to me and said, you better start talking.